Reservoir Dogs was the feature film debut of legendary director Quentin Tarantino. It features 8 men calmly enjoying a nice breakfast before robbing a bank for some diamonds. 6 of them under code names consist of Mr. White, played by Harvey Keitel, Mr. Orange, played by Tim Roth, Mr. Blonde, played by Michael Madsen, who isn't actually blonde. That really annoyed me for the entire film for some reason.
It's against the rules!
Mr. Pink, played by Steve Buscemi, Mr. Brown, played by Quentin Tarantino himself, Mr. Blue, played by Edward Bunker, then there's Joe, played by Lawrence Tierney, and Nice Guy Eddie, played by Chris Penn. The movie immediately starts with Mr. Orange being shot after the heist has already taken place and dragged into an abandoned warehouse by Mr. White as they're too afraid to go to a hospital. The others show up, but then the movie cuts back and forth to the past, showing the actual heist before and after events or even previous story elements, and then back to the warehouse because Tarantino has a huge fetish for time travel for some reason.
Correct!
It's slowly revealed that Mr. Orange is an undercover cop who tries to manipulate everyone and turn them against each other before basically everybody dies, except Mr. Pink, who takes off with the diamonds. Although, Tarantino claimed that he was caught, but survived. If you turn your volume up and listen really closely, after he walks outside, you can hear officers actually tell him to put his hands up and then fire, but then they successfully arrest him.
Yeah, and that was a miracle.
The film's production began when Quentin Tarantino was working in a video store in California. He intended to shoot a film with some friends on just a $30,000 budget with a black and white camera and have producer Lawrence Bender as a cop chasing Mr. Pink. Bender gave the script to his acting teacher, whose wife passed it on to Harvey Keitel himself. He liked it so much he signed on as a co-producer and helped with funding, successfully raising the budget to $1.5 million. With the cash, they held casting sessions in New York, successfully scooping up Steve Buscemi, Michael Madsen, and Tim Roth. Originally, Tarantino was to play Mr. Pink, and when Buscemi showed interest in that role, Quentin actually told him that it'd have to really impress him in order for him to hand over the part, and he did.
What the was I supposed to do?
In addition, Tom Sizemore auditioned for the role of Mr. Pink, and Dennis Hopper was also considered but was unavailable to try out. John Cryer was also approached but turned it down, admitting that he didn't understand the script. Oh, but he saw the cinematic genius of Superman 4.
What the you talking about?
Vincent Gallo turned down the role of Mr. Pink, George Clooney and Christopher Walken auditioned for Mr. Blonde but both didn't get it, Samuel L. Jackson tried out for Mr. Orange but was also rejected. Can you imagine saying no to Samuel L. Jackson?
You maniac!
Seymour Cassel and Robert Forster both tried out for the role of Joe. Ving Rhames was considered for Holdaway, a guy who has a meal with Mr. Orange. Matt Dillon was considered for Mr. Blonde, who also isn't blonde.
I know, mother. I just heard it.
Viggo Mortensen auditioned for an unknown role, and so did David Duchovny, who was told by Tarantino, "I like what you do, I just don't know if I want you to do it in my movie." Interestingly, James Woods was offered the part of Mr. Orange, but his agent turned it down because of the budget, claiming that Woods usually gets paid a lot more, but he never actually told the actor that he was offered it. Years later, when James himself found out about the part by Tarantino, he was so angry he fired his agent on the spot.
I mean, everybody panics. Everybody.
Tony Scott showed interest in directing, but Tarantino had his heart set on doing it himself, instead allowing him to do True Romance instead, and Monty Hellman also came close to being in the director's chair for Reservoir Dogs, but Quentin refused to let anybody else do the job. Tarantino also credited Stanley Kubrick's The Killing as inspiration, stating, "I didn't go out of my way to do a rip-off of The Killing, but I did think of it as my killing, my take on that kind of heist movie."
Nobody tells me what to do.
He admitted that he paid homages to other works like Kansas City Confidential, The Big Combo, City on Fire, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, and Django, but denied ever ripping any of them off. The idea to not show the heist itself began because they simply didn't have the budget, but then it became the entire premise of the story, which intrigued Tarantino further. He said this technique allowed the picture to focus on other things, and the plot is based on something that we don't even see, and he also wanted to play with a real-time clock as opposed to a movie clock ticking. And for those wondering about the title, what it means, what it's referring to, when Tarantino worked in that video store, he had a tendency to point customers towards lesser known films. And one of the films that he pointed them towards, he pointed a man towards Au revoir les enfants. And the man replied and mispronounced it as, "I don't want to watch no Reservoir Dogs." It doesn't really make much sense to why he called this Reservoir Dogs, but a little bit of trivia for you.
I guess you can say that again.
Au revoir les enfants struggled at first. When trying to find funding, many studios showed interest, but they all had a catch which Tarantino refused to oblige to. One insisted on everybody coming back to life at the end and having the entire thing being a hoax or something. That makes no sense. Another would only fund it if his girlfriend could play Mr. Blonde. And apparently that idea was so stupid that they actually considered it for a laugh.
Is that supposed to be funny?
Filming wasn't easy, especially for its low budget. Literally, Mr. Orange's apartment was the room directly above the warehouse. They were that limited. But furthermore, Lawrence Tierney was a constant nuisance. First, he was actually arrested in real life for pulling a gun on his own nephew during production. The actor was literally bailed out and then went straight to the movie set. In addition, on set, he constantly got distracted easily and always forgot his lines, which annoyed the entire cast and crew. He was so aggravating, he was fired on the 3rd day of shooting.
dick.
However, the use of violence and language was a huge problem with audiences, especially the scene where Mr. Blonde, look at his hair! He is not blonde. Why is he Mr. Blonde? Cuts off the ear of a tied up police officer, even after the actor ad-libs this line.
Please. Look, I got a little kid wrong now, please.
There's actually alternate cuts of the film where Madsen, who was a new father at this point, paused because he didn't know how to react and it was kept in. And Tarantino can also be heard whispering, oh no.
Nobody says after that.
Michael Madsen also struggled during the torture scene to begin with, and when that line was improvised, he could barely finish it, but somehow managed to power through. The scene was almost cut as Harvey Weinstein, the owner of Miramax, felt it would really upset audiences. However, Tarantino fought tooth and nail to keep it in and eventually won.
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?
Many people walked out of screenings. At the Sick Just Film Festival, 15 people walked out, including Wes Craven. Special makeup effects artist Rick Baker told Tarantino to take it as a compliment, considering the sense of realism was clearly heightened. It happens at every single screening. For some people, the violence or the rudeness of the language is a mountain they just can't climb. That's okay, it's not their cup of tea, but I'm affecting them. I wanted that scene to be disturbing. I really do like this film, and it's definitely an inspiration to any aspiring filmmaker.
My hero.
Such a great looking picture with such a unique image with inventive storytelling techniques on such a low budget is incredibly inspiring. Tarantino goes for some long takes which work really well and a lot of faraway shots that just allow you to lean forward and wish you were more involved. It kind of makes you want to be involved in the film more. During the torture scene, Mr. Blonde puts on some music to psychotically dance to before heading outside into the nice peaceful calm neighborhood to retrieve the gasoline and then back to the warehouse with the music. All one take, and it's beautifully done, really adding to the demented nature of the scene, and it makes it that more disturbing. In addition, he has some genius subtle touches throughout, so let's go through a few. There's this scene. Now there's coloured shirts and a rag and everything in the background, and the colours correspond to the characters. White and pink are close to one another, and the rag in the distance is orange, and Mr. Orange is in the next room. This may seem like a throwaway thing, but it's all the way through the whole film. Here they're having a conversation about Mr. Blonde and whether or not he's still alive. The sink is yellow, hinting that he is. Weirdly, there's a scene where an orange balloon appears, and many believed it was a hint about Mr. Orange being a snitch, but Tarantino confessed it was just a lucky coincidence and completely accidental. There is, however, intentional foreshadowing throughout the film in regards to Mr. Orange. My personal favourite being...
Wait a minute. Who didn't throw in?
Mr. Pink.
Mr. Pink.
Nice touch. Although, there's some really forced ones too.
You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize.
Shoot this piece of will you?
Subtle. In addition to his clever foreshadowing, he also makes connections to his other movies. It's revealed that Mr. Blonde's real name is Vic Vega, which is very similar to John Travolta's character Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction. Tarantino claims that the characters are actually brothers, and he did plan a prequel for both films based on those two siblings, but it was scrapped over the years when the actors grew too old for the parts. Furthermore, Steve Buscemi says,
And I used to work minimum wage, and when I did, I wasn't lucky enough to have a job that society deemed tip-worthy.
This is a nod to Pulp Fiction where the actor plays a waiter. Obviously this was made beforehand, but I just love Tarantino's clever writing and linking his films together in such a subtle yet genius manner. Speaking of which, Buscemi in my mind steals the entire show. His character is such a smooth talking son of a bitch, and his brutal and blunt honesty is so true and accurate.
You don't care they're counting on your tips to live? You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
This is a hard job.
So is working at McDonald's, but you don't feel the need to tip them, do you? Well, why not? They're serving you food. But no, society says, don't tip these guys over here, but tip these guys over here. That's bullshit.
Tarantino also utilizes his long takes to either slowly reveal something, or the opposite, panning away to leave it all to our imagination. He plays with the audience's perception so well, and he's definitely one of the most creative directors I've ever seen. There's also a scene where Mr. Orange is telling a story about when he was selling some drugs and he went to the bathroom and spotted some cops. As the story pans out, he's saying this dialogue to his friends in the bar, but then we're seeing him physically speak them to the cops in the bathroom as the camera rotates around him. It's really mesmerizing, and then when he dries his hands, the suspense is built as we shift into slow motion mode as the sounds of the dryer takes over. It's really intense, and I don't think anyone could ever see Tarantino as a dull or simple filmmaker. This is artistically gold. I love that the majority of the film is set in one location. I dig that format, and it adds to the creativity to maintain the audience's attention despite its limitations. The whole time-lapse stuff is kind of overdone now, but back then it was so new and creative, and Tarantino really knew how to mess with that kind of stuff, which we'll get onto another time. The scene where they all assign their code names is also probably my favourite scene in the entire movie. The chemistry the actors all have together is fire, and the dialogue is hilarious.
Why am I Mr. Pink?
Because you're a all right?
The ending, however, caused many a confusion. So Mr. I'm Not Blonde is about to kill the cop.
All you can do is pray for a quick death, which you ain't gonna get.
But then he pulls out a gun to shoot him in the face, which would be a quick death. Anyway, he's about to set him on fire, but Mr. Orange shoots him dead instead. The others show up, he lies about Blonde's plans to set him up, but Rush Hour Man here doesn't buy it, and we get a three-way shootout.
I ignored her before, but no more. You lost your mind.
What a predicament.
They all shoot each other. Mr. White consoles Mr. Orange, who then confesses to being a cop the whole time, and White then has the world's biggest dump. Oh, you need a laxative. And then he kills him and is shot himself by cops to end the film. Many people didn't understand the logic and asked Tarantino why he would confess right then and there instead of simply waiting 60 seconds and getting away completely scot-free. Who's Scott? Why is he always free?
Hardy hard.
You did not truly understand the movie if you're asking this question. In all the Asian countries that this movie was released in, this question was never once asked. In Japan, they have a word for this called jingi. Without an English equivalent, it basically means that this was something that Mr. Orange had to do as a man, something that he owed Mr. White. Furthermore, he could only do it in those 60 seconds when Mr. White would have the opportunity to do whatever he deemed necessary. When Mr. White first drugs Mr. Orange into the warehouse, he does absolutely nothing to try to stop the bleeding. He would be dead in minutes. This extra clearly walks out, realizes they're in the shot, and then hides. Nice one, ruined it for everybody.
We were set up. The cops were there waiting for us.
What? Nobody set anybody up.
He's the only bad actor in the entire film. Honestly, don't believe me?
Why don't you tell me what really happened?
The rest of the acting is tremendous, but Kai Tao does have one bad read.
God damn you, Joe. Don't make me do this.
God damn you, Joe. And I'm not sure if it was the intent, but I can't help but laugh at these lines and the overacting.
And he cuts my ear off. I'm deformed. You. I'm dying here. I'm dying.
Oh, you're so dramatic.
What the hell is up with this music?
Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka.
You get this really, really intense and eerie scene of them following the car, and then that music plays. I mean, could you do that with any other suspenseful scene?
Somebody help me, please! Somebody help!
Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka.
At one point, Mr. White says,
Man, could you believe Mr. Blonde?
That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. Why the would Joe hire a guy like that? We're awful goddamn lucky he didn't tag us when he shot the place up. I came this close to taking his ass out myself.
but yet later on,
You said yourself you thought about taking him out.
no he didn't, you did.
Said that.
Yeah, I did, okay?
Unfortunately, Edward Bunker, who played Mr. Blue, slated the film's realism, calling it incredibly unrealistic. I would never consider committing a robbery with 5 people I don't know and therefore can't trust, and it would be extremely foolhardy for a distinctively dressed gang to publicly have breakfast together beforehand, so when the news of the robbery broke, witnesses would obviously be able to remember us. Reservoir Dogs is really well directed, it's shot really well, it's edited immensely well, the acting is tremendous, the dialogue is incredibly well written, it's well put together, it's very, very creative on such a low budget, it's definitely worth checking out.
Because it's so much fun, Chan. Get it?